Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar here, the Savannah Guthrie Effect, Why Some Missing Persons Cases Make Headlines and Others Don't. I'm Greg Kosowski. I'm with the Children's Advocacy Centers of North Dakota. We have Sandra Bursey here, who will be our presenter. It's going to be a little bit different format today. It'll be kind of a question and answer. I have a list of questions I'm going to ask Sandra, and she's going to respond to them. If you folks listening here have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. Both of those should be open to everyone. So either the chat or the Q&A, I'll be monitoring it during the webinar here. Social work credits will be available at the end here, and I'll have a link that I'll send out in the chat. And that link will also be available in the follow-up email tomorrow. If you're hearing echoing, that might be you have two Zoom screens open, maybe in your app and a browser. So just note if you have some echoing going on, it might be that. All right, so why don't you grab your lunch and get settled in, and we'll get started here. So the Savannah Guthrie Effect, we this is a ND Hope Project webinar. This is the last in our series of webinars. We got some exciting webinars coming up in the fall as well, but this will be our last one for the season here. Now, Nancy Guthrie, we had the name here just because this is a very familiar case. Savannah Guthrie's mom, Nancy. This is way back in January 31st, where after her son-in-law had dropped her off at home um, that evening, sometime during the night, there's a masked and gloved individual that came in and abducted her. And so they've been still, Savannah Guthrie, very well-known Today Show host. She's been put out a lot of pleas for help. And even within the last week, I just looked at her Instagram, and last week, 7 days ago, she posted another call for help, just saying if anyone has any leads, 1-800 call FBI. So Nancy is still out there somewhere. Now, this story garnered a lot of media attention, and it makes sense. Savannah Guthrie, very well-known media personality, host of Today Show, has been so much support online and social media, and even the White House has offered resources to help with the search. So the issue that we want to talk about today, we don't want to criticize that story by any means. In fact, we want it to be sort of a model because that level of media attention is really what we'd like to see for a lot more cases here. So, Sandra, I'm just going to read your bio, and this is so Sandra is an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. She's wholeheartedly dedicated to her work as the executive director of First Nations Women's Alliance. She has an MBA from Gonzaga University and a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of Mary. Now, her bio, like the professional things you normally see in a bio that, is on this board and does this and this. No, Sandra's bio continues like this. From a biological perspective, Sandra has 4 daughters, 1 son, 7 granddaughters, 6 grandsons, 3 great-grands that call her Kukum. From a heart perspective, she has innumerable children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Sandra lives a humble and traditional life with her love, Rick. So thank you, Sandra, for sharing those personal details. You don't see that in a bio very often, so glad to see that. So first question, Sandra, I wanted to ask you about First Nations Women's Alliance. Tell us a little bit about First Nations Women's Alliance, and then how did you come into this work?
Um, First Nations Women's Alliance actually will celebrate its 20th anniversary in 2028. Uh, it was started out as part of the state coalition um, for domestic violence and sexual assault. So Bonnie Palachek, who's one of she works for First Nations now, founded and Cause is coming up on their 50th anniversary in 2028. So it's real it's a work. We're all just one big family. I joined First Nations in 2016. So this is like my 10th year. Uh I came into this work because I was on a survivor group with Cause, sort of an advisory group to the state council. It was a group we called Life After Fear. We called ourselves Laugh, because we would laugh, even though we all had really crummy stories to tell. We would laugh a lot when we were together, and healing that way. So from there, I met Linda Thompson, and then Linda sort of recruited me to come to First Nations. So that's how I got this job. But I am a survivor of domestic violence, sexual assault, a lot of the criminal things.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. So the topic we're talking about today, MMIP, MMIW, MMIWR, is there a preferred terminology you have? And what does that full term mean?
I prefer right now, maybe it'll change, but I prefer MMIR. Um, it means missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. I like to, we First Nations, I hashtag be a good relative many years ago, and that's what, to me, that's if we were all looking for our relative, we might be looking harder, and maybe be more people involved. So the initial part was MMIW, though, when it started up in Canada a few years ago, because so many women were going missing. So they just said women.
Okay.
The same thing I don't want to forget is that a few years ago, when Ruth Buffalo uh, got into when she became a representative for the state, she brought forth a bill for setting up a database for missing and murdered Indigenous women at the time. And then while they were working on that, they realized the whole state, nobody had a database. So they started that initiated the North Dakota database for murdered and missing people. So it became more than just Indigenous people. It became all of North Dakota. Again, being good relatives to everybody.
Hmm. Is that a publicly available database, or is that a database for law enforcement, or?
No, it's on the state website, indy.gov. You can find it there. Uh, I check it quite often. I was on it a little bit earlier looking be because in a little bit I'm going to talk about Gemini Posey, right? And I went to see what her picture looked like in that database, and there was no picture.
Hmm. Wow. Any attendees, if you're able to find that link and put it in the chat, please feel free to do so. I don't want to get
Yeah.
distracted here. So let's talk about that case, a Gemini, and I'm going to share her image here. Can you give us a background in this case and tell us a little bit more?
Well, Gemini, I never knew Gemini. I've had the opportunity now to meet her mother and her family. I've seen her little boy, um, and done a lot of like work with Spirit Lake victim assistance. They've headed a lot of the searches for Gemini, but she went missing. I want to say not this January, but the January before. Um, that has not been found. And like I was talking to her mother one day at one of the searches, and her mom is just this little tiny woman. And then she said, Gemini's even smaller than me. And I was like, oh, she must have just been, and it says on one of those other things like 4'8", or, and weighed, probably, I don't know, she weighed 100 pounds. She was really tiny. So she just, I always think because she left a little boy behind, um, that's got to be, he's going to grow up without his mother. He'll never, he'll not probably have any memories of her because he was a baby.
Can you talk about what's known about the case, the timeline, and some of the searches that have gone on?
The I you know the I don't think I'm not as familiar with all of that. I because there's, you know what? There's too many things to, there's too many people to be specific about, like to remember all the details about one case. Because when, like, I don't, you guys know, like just, well, Gemini went missing. And a little bit later, well, just this last year, her boyfriend's brother was arrested, I believe, for killing his brother. So though I think that's how it is. You gotta forgive me for being a little bit, I Greg did not share, but I lost my mom last night, and so I'm a little bit fuzzy, but um like that, like Abrium, that's one of the bigger, that's Abrium. um I want to say Great Walker, but that was, oh, Swain. He was found last week or the week before, and he was a 12-year-old boy, was missing on Turtle Mountain. And that, like, it happens more often than any of us know. And that's one of the questions that we have, or one of the questions we had before, um is like, why did, like, what's the Savannah Guthrie effect, right? Or the Nancy Guthrie effect. And even if you think back, the Drew Shadeen effect.
Hmm.
Remember when Drew went missing, and it was all over, all over pretty much the country, but North Dakota, they got um a lot of press. But when somebody from here goes missing, most of the time we don't get any press. So, and why is that, right? We think, well, why is that? And um, one of the things is jurisdictional issues, so that when something happens on a reservation, if the tribal police, even if it involves a crime that goes above a misdemeanor, a felony, then the FBI comes in. And once the FBI is involved, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they don't share a lot of information. So even to get, like Jamie Davis did a lot of work on the feather alert. But to get to that, so it's oftentimes, you got to go through a lot of red tape, a lot of red
Hmm.
tape. So that's in my opinion. Um, so
So you have the jurisdictional issue. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, it might not be just BAI or BIA and FBI. It might also be a local sheriff, county sheriff. Might there be BCI with the state of North Dakota Bureau of Criminal?
we have checkerboard, and pretty much every reservation is a checkerboard. You might have a good reservation border, but outside of that border, it's checkerboard. Some of it is county, some of it is, state or tribal. So you could be anywhere around here in the Turtle Mountains, and you don't know for sure who has jurisdiction.
So what happens in those cases where is it everyone, and there's that Spider-Man meme where they're like pointing at each other? Is it kind of like that? Like, okay, who's got this case? Who's taking the lead? It's just everyone's pointing fingers, but no one is taking responsibility, or
Ah, I don't know if it's not, because all of the people that I know, like my relatives that are in law enforcement, are really, they care. They really care a lot. But their hands might be tied by above them,
hmm.
by their supervisors, or um when you're when it becomes federal, then it's a process. So I wouldn't say anybody's really too, there's no blame. I don't want to, I'm just always grateful for anybody who's really willing to help.
Hmm.
Uh, a few years ago, an elder woman that that was from maybe the Rolla area. She was not native. She wasn't native, and she was an elder. And I believe they put out a silver alert on her, but it was all of a sudden it was all over Facebook, and I had I had I had people here that like my kids and my grandkids, and we decided to go and help with the search. And if you know me, you rarely will see me without a skirt on. So, I'm out at, and this happened at Lake Upsilon, and in a cabin that this family owned. This woman's sister got upset and ran away from her sister. And she was just a little tiny thing, too. And so we're out there praying. That's what, like, that's where I start, is I go out there and talk to their spirit from my spirit. And I put, I pray and pray and pray and pray. And so we were walking, and all of a sudden I was by this taller non-native woman. I don't like saying white, because they could have, you know, I just don't like saying that. I'll just say non-native, or but she was walking with and a man, and I was kind of was gonna go past her, and she said, "I want to ask you a question. Can you stop? I want to ask you a question." And I turned at her, and she said, "Why are you here?" And I said, and she said, "That's my sister. She's my sister. You guys
Hmm.
are helping us look for my sister." She said, "But I don't understand why, I mean, why would you guys care?" Kind of was the gist of this question. And I said, "Well, because we're all related." I said, "And when I saw that a woman that could easily be my mother was out there missing, you know, I can't ignore that. I can't
Hmm.
ignore." And then she was, she was they were very grateful for her. And if any of you've been to Lake Upsilon, or anywhere here in the Turtle Mountains, the bushes are thick. In the summertime, like, you can't, there's absolutely no way. Plus they're full of poison ivy. Um, so she had taken off into the woods, and most people that are of a normal size, maybe even heavier, there's no way you can even get around in those bushes because they're so thick. So
Hmm.
it was like, but so we prayed and prayed and prayed, and then it got dark, and they said, everybody come in, but come in. We all had our phones and stuff. We'll start the search again in the morning. And so, but a lot of us prayed, a lot of us, and I'm sure her family was praying. And they were gonna set up like the search area, and they all met at one place, and they were setting up the sections that they're going to search and who's going to be assigned to this. And here that woman comes stumbling out of the bushes. She's small, right? But she's completely covered with mud and leaves. Like, you
Hmm.
could, if you didn't see the movement, you wouldn't know that there was anybody there, because she was so full of dirt. And she had a little white outfit on. It was just completely um, covered with dirt. But instead of the search party finding her, she actually found the search party. But to me, that's exactly how Creator works.
Hmm.
That was the prayers and the love and all that we were putting out for her. She
Hmm.
she came out, she was found. We always laugh about that, because it's like they didn't even really see her right away, because they were all, concentrating on what they're gonna do, and she's standing kind of behind them, like, "I'm right
Hmm.
here."
Hmm.
Cool ending to what could have
Yeah.
been a lot, so much worse.
Hmm. Yeah. So the searches that you've been a part of, is there a critical element to those starting pretty early in the process once a missing person is reported and starting
Yes,
those early?
I believe. I believe so. And one of my nieces, her name is Leslie Yellowbird Chase. She's she has dogs that help with searches.
Mm,
And like we're related to everything. We're related to the rocks, to the trees, to the birds. My grandma a long time ago told me if I ever got lost in the woods, she said, just look around, you'll hear an animal, or there'll be something, and if you follow it, it will take you out and get you back. You'll get out of there. And because the animals will tell me how to get out. So I've always remembered that. She said it could even be a cow, because we all know cows are not the smartest creatures in the world, but they would still it's just always something I remembered. But um yeah, it is very important to get. So actually our Turtle Mountain is beginning what's called a horse nation. Um and they're training horses. We're not the first people that have done it. They have a horse nation over where in Browning, Montana. And I think that there'll be even um, more of that coming, because horses are very intuitive, and they're good finders of things. So we're starting. I should say I'm just supporting them, but there's a nation getting good, so um, that will help. So you
mm,
don't just, like if you wait too long, the dogs can't find a scent. You know,
mm,
people when you're searching for someone, and many years ago, our family lost one of my uncles, and we searched from Thursday, was a Thursday before Easter, and then he was found on Easter Day. And
mm,
we searched and searched and searched. So we're out on horses, four-wheelers, trucks, we're out in full force, but we're also trampling, and if there was any kind of evidence, we would have been going over it. So
mm,
we're learning that, like with the horses, if you get out right away, all that stuff is just still there. So
mm. So you've been on a lot of these searches. Do
I've been,
you, oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was just going to ask, being on a lot of those searches when a new case comes up, do you take the lead usually on that, or how does that work? No?
No, I would probably take the prayer lead.
Mm,
Somebody asked me to, but no, I no, there's people that are way better than that. I'll be 65 this summer, Greg. I'm not I lucky if I can get outside without tripping. So no, there's a lot of people that have they're been trained, and um yeah, no, we and two, like we do want, I believe in law enforcement. I believe that they're here to protect and serve, for the most part. So um I would let them. But we, like, when Lorenzo Bullhead went missing, and he's still missing, it was, in Bismarck, and the train bridge was part of the search area, and people, some people feel that he ended up in the river. Um, so what we did as First Nations was provide binoculars, and like what, and then we'd help. As First Nations do get donations, because MMIW work isn't really, I mean, like they've set up those offices in the bigger cities. Like one of my relatives just got fired from the MMIW office in Minneapolis. Um, and a non-native took her place. So we're not very happy about that. Shout out to my sister, or my girl, my relative. But we don't get funding. So if we get donations, a lot of times that's where we put we put money into. Um, we've gotten actually a few foundation grants that are specifically for MMIW,
Hmm.
and we just try to do the best that we can, with what we have. And but for Renzo's, that I thought they needed um, binoculars to be able to see the shore from the river.
Hmm. What are
Different church is different. Like that one, there was one in Standing Rock, and it was during a winter storm. So
Hmm.
we got um, two-way radios. We got coveralls and hats and gloves, and because people who were going to be searching there were going to. It was cold. It was really, really cold.
Hmm. Tanya, thank you for your question. I was about to ask the very same question. The process for those who want to help out, is there a certain resource or social media account that when these missing person cases happens, because it's you talk about that critical time within those first 24, 48 hours, where people can subscribe and get updates and help out.
I don't know how to answer that because uh, there was a period of time. I'm just going to be frank and honest here, that like it was kind of like the in thing to be involved with murdered and missing, even if you and I've even had it said about me, like, oh, what are you doing? Or it's like,
Hmm.
um anyway. But I hate to say this, I would watch Facebook. I when like before, when I'm concerned about somebody and it says contact that police department, then I stay on their website, because the police will know first. They'd be the ones that would identify and that kind of thing. So a lot of times people just put stuff up in there and they don't know for sure if it's the truth.
Hmm.
So I'm really careful about reposting stuff, or that law enforcement is pretty important in that process. So I would leave it to the professionals.
Hmm. So following one of those, we talked about the jurisdictional crossover that might happen. So yeah, one of those law enforcement agencies in that region following their accounts. So that might be, I guess, wherever, maybe that's one takeaway here is whatever region of the state you're in, follow those law enforcement jurisdictions in your area. So Bismarck, you're following Morton County, Burleigh County, Bismarck PD, Mandan PDs, each of these,
You
even
have to
Standing Rock.
you have to have some legal authority to be able to enter on to somebody's, property. You can't just go walking through people's yards. Even in the Renzo case, there were certain people that said, don't come into my yard. Or in,
Mm,
in Gemini's case, the owner of the where she went missing from didn't want people on his property. And you have that right as a citizen, to tell people stay off my property,
mm,
unless you can get a warrant, right? But then you have to have, it's a process for
mm,
every one of them. But I would say, um, again, I know that not everybody's as faithful as I am in what creator can do, but that's also my go-to, is to pray, is to
mm,
be the best relative you can be, Greg, because
mm,
um I think about that, like when like Renzo is the same. He was a little bit younger than my own son. That lady that went missing in Lake Upsilon, she was my mom's age. uh Carla Yellowbird, who was missing and then was found on Spirit Lake. My daughter, that was my daughter's sister, because they're first cousins. So, like they're they're your relatives. If you think of it like that. I
Mhm.
always tell people, if like we have bystander law, laws or rules of engagement, Um and the first time I ever heard that word bystander, I was like, what is that? What is a bystander? And then they were explaining, I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, man, I'm never a bystander. I tell you, if something's going down, you want me to be there because I'm going to be your relative and I'm going to help you. I'm not just going to stand there and start recording or whatever. I've jumped right into situations that I had no business, but like I, everybody's my relative, so I help everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that relative, I really like how you put that in terms like that. We've done or talked about child abuse prevention campaigns and sort of that be a good neighbor or be a good like care for those around you. It's like basic stuff that I feel we shouldn't have to say, but you know,
Right.
we still should say it.
I know like one thing that I tell that grandkids all the time, don't go any place. Like my family spent a lot of time together this weekend. I come from my mom had 11, there was 11 kids in their family, and
Mm,
she's the first girl to first daughter, to have died. But we were telling stories about, like how we grew up and that kind of thing. And we used to be able to like go play outside, and we would go out in the morning and then we would come in at night. We might go back there to eat if we were hungry, or if we didn't, we would look for berries, we would, whatever. We just was just the thing to play outside. Well, anymore, if our kids go outside and they don't come back for a few minutes, we're going to start searching for them because it's not the same world. It's
yeah,
not world anymore. So if you stay in touch, uh, never go, don't go off by yourself. I used to go walk in the woods by myself all the time, you know, especially when I was turning into a teenager. But I would never go walk in the woods by myself anymore.
mm,
I I took my grandson to Armourdale Dam last week just to watch the water run. And then when we were there, I was like, this is probably not a good place for me to be by myself with this little boy. So I got us back in the car and got out of there because I'm like, yeah, nobody they'll start coming out when fishing starts, I suppose, but
mm,
yeah, you got to
yeah.
be a good relative and use the buddy system. And
Mm,
one time I was at a training, and um it was a national level training, and this person said, oh, they had showed a filming of was it called Wind River?
mm,
That girl that went missing, and it had to do with like the oil industry. And anyway, but a non-native person from the crowd asked of the panel, why do more Native American people go missing than anybody else? And then the person that answered said, it's really because of poverty, on the
mm,
reservations. And I was like, excuse me. And I said, what, I don't think that's true, that it's because of poverty and because, I said, it's because I tell you what, nobody is going to leave without telling their grandma, their aunties, their uncles. they're not going to leave without telling them, I'm good. I said, we sometimes call that moving or going to college. That's the only, like, it's not always, you know, although, now in the world of trafficking, it is an issue of, somebody gets, they lure our little ones, to go someplace, and then they'll take them, and that, because they'll be like, I'll get you this, or I'll get you that. That might be trafficking. Probably is more of a issue of poverty than um,
Mm.
going, like murdered and missing. I was like, no, most of the time it's something different. It's not poverty that makes people go murdered and missing.
Mhm. Are there other ways, if you were asked that question, what other answers would you have given the question? Yeah.
That she asked about the, I would,
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it's one thing that I believe we should do more of is teaching our kids, teaching our little relatives, um, how, like we're working to increase protective factors, that, like, that's one of the ways that I think we can change the future of our children, is to teach them, higher self-esteem, higher, just being a good relative. That's, I think that, if we were out there protecting one another, not letting each other just go, even I years ago, my mom would come to Bismarck. She was a guidance counselor, and they'd come to Bismarck. And one day I said, what are you doing? And we were on the phone at the hotel. She was on the phone, which now you never, nobody ever, I don't know why they have those phones in those rooms, because nobody's gonna use them. But she called me, and I said, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I just went for a walk. She said, I just went for a walk, and she was staying down by Kirkwood Mall. And I was like, you can't be going for a walk. Because some people remember that there was a couple that got taken from the Fairfield on the north side of Bismarck, and they were murdered. Like they got taken, and they were found in another state, I think, and they had been murdered. So
Mm.
I'm like, you can't just be walking around by my mom was a tiny woman.
Mm.
Like, don't be doing that. So, that kind of thing, you have to just not, it's a different world. You can't just, and, my mom would walk around here. I live right now is in the house. I live here where she lived. And you could walk around outside, but not around Kirkwood Mall. So I was
Mm.
scared.
Mm. I gotta mention one thing, Sandra, in the chat. Ashley says Sandra is a powerhouse. Hashtag be a good relative. And someone echoed that as well. I want to shift gears to one of the main MMIR cases that made national headlines back in 2017. This is the Savannah LaFontaine Graywin case. Could you tell us a little bit about that case? And then there's a Savannah's law, the federal nationwide law that came after that one, and kind of talk about that law a bit.
Um, Well, Savannah, I never got to meet Savannah myself that I'm aware of, but I have gotten to learn, or gotten to meet and become friends, I guess, with her folks. Um, she she was trusting. And that, like, that's part of increasing your safety safety factors,
Hmm.
is you can't trust everybody. And that woman that, was, um that woman lured her up to her place. So house and Savannah, and she was, beautiful woman, and um, yeah, so she was murdered, and then found later in the river. And um it was it was so brutal. It was so brutal. And then there came a point where when Heidi Heitkamp was in office, she, why I, I know, I personally know some of the hike camps. I work with Melanie, and I've done some work with Thomasine, and um, Heidi really was supportive of Indian country for the most part. She contacted First Nations and asked if we would help her find people who would be willing to get behind her bill. And so I contacted a couple of families, and then other people that are like with First Nations, our board. Um, they also knew families. So the one of the people was Monica Bercier Wickery. She's my sister cousin. She was one of the people that was a part of that bill. And then another young woman named Stella Graves. She was a trottier. She was my sister's really good friend. Got them hooked up with them. So um, thank goodness that Heidi did the work that she did. Some people like, some tribes don't like Savannah's Act. To be on, and like I don't even know how to speak to it, because I've never, I know what it's about generally, but I don't really pay attention to it, because that's like level. Um, but
Because the bill required, I believe it was a couple things. One was something about requiring law enforcement agencies to have protocols and processes in place. And the Savannah LaFontaine Graywind case was actually a good example of law enforcement, from what I understand, good example of them coordinating through jurisdictions. I mean, nobody's perfect. I'm sure there were gaps, but um, they did a pretty good job there. But yeah, it required.
I know that there were some things that happened, and that they will say in a bigger place like Fargo, was were they out drinking? Was she doing
Hmm.
this? That's oftentimes that's part of the issue, is they'll go right to what were they doing to get themselves into this trouble.
Like a victim blaming type thing.
So that's I think that we always work on becoming better relatives to our law enforcement agencies that are out there. Oh, yeah, like the highway patrol right now has a young man named Shane, and he's just awesome, and he's a liaison uh, for the tribal communities. And that's improvement. That's improvement, where they realize that there are ways to get better, and learn about one another, and build trust is important.
Hmm. Yeah, in that case, uh, the person who murdered Savannah got life in prison, and then her associate had got 20 years. So there was some semblance of justice done there. But um, let's talk a little bit about state policy. North Dakota had an interesting thing. You talked about just briefly the feather alerts. This passed in 2025. I think most people are familiar with silver alerts for missing seniors, elderly folks, amber alerts for abducted children. Can you talk a little bit about feather alerts, and then how's that been working so far? I mean, the law has only been in effect a few months, but what have you seen so far?
Honestly, I don't know if I've even had, if has there been a feather alert? I don't know.
Hmm.
I It's really there. I have some cool, like uh what's the name of the highway patrol? She's does works on the murdered and missing, um, Jen. Jen. Um, to become eligible for any kind of alert, the family has to be willing to file a police report, go to the police and file a report, and that's what initiates all of the um, alert systems. And
Hmm.
oftentimes, um, there are still issues with trust of police and trust of the systems, and so but hopefully that it becomes more popular, I'll say. I don't know, that's not the right word, but that people will trust that system more and use it.
Hmm. Yeah, Sarah made a comment here in the chat. There should have been a feather alert for the boy from Belcourt. Never heard a thing. So,
Yeah, there wasn't. And I know of some other cases that's why I said I'm not aware of a feather alert going out.
hmm.
No,
Uh,
and I don't I I I I know very little about Abraham. Um, my son-in-law was his teacher. Um, Loved him. Thought he was a really great kid. And there probably are. I said I have I made a post and I said casting blame is not being a good relative.
hmm,
Uh, Looking, like you've been taking your own inventory is the best is the way to be the best relative. Like, what could I have done? What could I have done when that happened? Because I knew some things. I knew they had um those two boys went missing at the same time and ran away. Um, but yeah, but one of the things that concerns me about that whole situation is that everybody that nobody really who there's not a lot of people that know what actually happened. I mean, like they just people make last week I heard that they found 7 bodies on a place on the reservation here,
hmm,
and that was not true. It wasn't true. So it's
hmm,
you have to be careful to be aware of everything that happened or
hmm.
happens. Sometimes
And
it's not how like people people like to be dramatic. I'm probably guilty of that myself. So I'm like, don't listen to everything.
hmm,
Keep your mind open and pray pretty much. I would pray
hmm,
a lot.
hmm,
I had Abraham and Mason's picture on my what do you call them, picture window, the big window in your living room. I had their pictures up.
hmm,
Not that anybody would see them from the road, but praying for them to be found.
hmm.
I um yeah, relatives that work in that system, and like I said, we all know each other. We all know each other, so it's
Hmm. Yeah, and Aaron, thank you, Aaron, for they listed the criteria for a feather alert activation. It must be 18 years or older, so that might be the reason.
well,
So yeah, it's something to keep an eye on the feather alerts going forward and how often they're used and if there's any adjustments in 2027 that the legislature needs to make.
yeah, yeah.
So
So yeah,
um,
silver. I think don't you guys think in North Dakota, like the most alerts we've had lately are the silver
hmm,
alerts. Those will wake you up in the middle of the night when they go out. I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah, silver alerts, that's what I usually get for sure. Thank you, Caroline, for the link there too. Folks can check that in chat on public alerts. I want to ask, we just have a few more minutes here, 4 or 5 minutes. Well, let's end with this one. There's some practical things that webinar participants can do to help. We talked about following law enforcement social media just for when those missing person alerts come out. Are there other things that
I
we
think
can do?
like talking to your kids, to your families, to, just teaching people that you have to really protect yourself, and you have to be able to discern, figure out more who's good and who's bad, because there's a lot of bad out there. Um,
I didn't ask you about the stats because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the stats are changing frequently, like the number of missing persons cases. That link that's out there right now, that's the missingpersons.nd.gov is a good
yeah,
resource.
they 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 keep it up to, I mean, it's like really up to date as when I've looked at it. There's also what is the national NamUs? NamUs is a good resource, and you can only get on the NamUs system through law enforcement, and you can only get off NamUs through law enforcement. So people, if they post, say they're on NamUs, and then if they'll write or call or send a message, I'm not missing, I'm okay. You have to go up at a police station in person with and prove that you're actually okay, because it could be a trafficking issue and they're not okay, but somebody has their phone and is pretending, and that's a whole nother thing, is this whole, is AI. We really have to step up our awareness, our alertness on how we let ourselves and our children and to be on social media is a whole different ballgame now.
Hmm,
That scares the daylights out of me.
hmm. Yeah, right now there are 52 missing persons in North Dakota. 11 are Indigenous, 11, 12 children. So that's all that missingpersons.nd.gov. I was not aware of that website. That's a very helpful resource from the Attorney General's office. Um,
I one thing that I would like, to happen is that our police forces, law enforcement, like more of or the bureau and tribal would provide the pictures. And sometimes, I yeah, they say, well, we do, or but why, why is Gemini Posey's picture not on the website? uh because you could, there was a guy on the website, I don't know if he's still in there, I haven't gone through the whole list for a bit. um he was like weighed he was like six something and weighed 300 pounds. I'm like, man, if somebody saw him, maybe it would be very obvious that he was a big guy, he had a beard. So it helped to have a picture. So if
hmm,
you run across somebody like that, you'll be like, hey, because
yeah.
be very easily recognizable.
Hmm. Yeah. All right, last question. Is there anything else you wanted to mention that we didn't get to talk about today?
Oh, like I told you, Greg, my brain has not had a lot of sleep for a few days, so um just to be the best relative that you can. Be a good, that's the that's our saying, that's what we say. We call one of our things at First Nations is called medicine in action. And we put out our, as part of our prevention program. But what medicine in action is this, is you, is me. I saw Anna's name go by. We're the medicine. That's it. We're the medicine in action. Our hearts is where we learn to be better to each other. And I think, like just being the best relative that you can be is what I would say is, be good and be kind and be alert.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sandra, for I can definitely tell your passion for this subject. I mean, even on a day like this where you've just lost someone close to you and you're still willing to show up and talk about this extremely important topic. So again, thank you so much. I'm going to end with a couple links here in the chat. This first one is a link for you social workers out there if you'd like to get CEUs for this. There's also in that survey for the others interested in giving us some more topic ideas for the ND Hope project. Feel free to fill out that survey and give us some ideas as well. We want to keep highlighting important issues like MMIR. Another link I'm going to put here in the chat, the 31/8 project is having their human trafficking summit starting tomorrow, tomorrow and Wednesday, 2-day conference. Go ahead and check out the agenda there. Some really good speakers that are going to be there. And then the third link here I'm going to put is for the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Network. We're having our third meeting. This is a network of professionals who are interested in preventing child sexual abuse. We're meeting on Thursday. So if you click on that link, csapreventionnetwork.com, and scroll down to join, I think it says join. You just sign up to get reminders about the meetings. We have Dr. Elizabeth Jeglich on Thursday. She's the expert in the nation on sexual grooming. And we also have a North Dakota author we're going to highlight who wrote a book on child sexual abuse prevention. So lots of good content there as well. So yeah, look for some ND Hope Project, more webinars coming out in the fall, and we have some other projects in the work as well. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and thank you again, Sandra, for your time, and appreciate it. All right, take care, everyone.